Chapter 3. Into the Depths. The Starlight Voyager rested in a small clearing carved out of Vardis's dense jungle, a fortress of metal against the encroaching wild. The atmosphere was oppressive, humid air clinging to their skin like an invisible shroud. Birds cawed and insects buzzed, but there was an uneasy stillness in the undergrowth. John leaned casually on his staff, the leather brim of his hat pulled low over his face. His easy demeanor belied the tension in his muscles as he observed the group of tribal guards encircling them. Their weapons gleamed, a mix of crude spears, jagged blades, and crossbows crafted from bone and sinew, all aimed unwaveringly at him, Erica, and Lucas. The chief, a weathered figure whose cloak was adorned with tribal symbols, stepped forward. He spoke in sharp, guttural tones, his words unintelligible to them. "That doesn't sound like a welcome party," John muttered. "We need to get through them without bloodshed," Erica replied, her voice low and commanding. She glanced at Lucas, who was slightly behind them, his hands trembling as he gripped his satchel. "Lucas, you'll need to step in." Lucas hesitated, his throat dry. He could feel the stares of the guards, suspicious, wary, ready to act at the slightest misstep. He'd barely recovered from the strain of their last encounter, and now Erica was asking for more. He began, but Erica's sharp gaze cut him off. "You can do this," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We can't risk a fight here." Lucas stepped forward, closing his eyes and drawing a shaky breath. Slowly, he reached out with his telepathy, letting his mind touch the edges of the chief's thoughts. The surface was a blur of mistrust and anger, but as he delved deeper, the weight of the Empire's presence on this land struck him like a tidal wave. The chief's memories unfolded like a scarred tapestry. Villages burned to ash, the air thick with the cries of the dying. Imperial machines tearing through sacred forests, their progress leaving barren wastelands in their wake. Entire families torn apart, neighboring tribes reduced to scattered survivors. The devastation was overwhelming, the grief palpable. Lucas staggered back, gasping. He pressed a hand to his temple as the chief barked an order, his voice rising. The guards stepped closer, their weapons angling for the kill. "Lucas, focus!" Erica snapped, fire flickering at her fingertips in case things turned violent. John stepped between them, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. Slowly, deliberately, he removed a small bundle from his satchel. He unwrapped it, revealing a knife forged from rare steel and inlaid with tribal designs he had collected from a distant land. The chief's eyes flicked to the blade, curiosity and recognition tempering his fury. John knelt, setting the knife on the ground and pushing it forward with the tip of his staff. "A gift," John said slowly, his voice calm and deliberate. He gestured to the knife, then to the Starlight Voyager behind them, then to the dense jungle ahead. "We leave the ship here. You guard it. We pass through your land in peace." The chief regarded John with a scrutinizing gaze. He spoke again, his tone less sharp, though still guarded. "Lucas," Erica said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We need confirmation." Lucas inhaled sharply, fighting past his exhaustion. He reached out again, gentler this time, searching for the chief's intent. Amid the tangled web of grief and defiance, Lucas found a grudging agreement. The tribe would accept the knife as a token of respect and guard the ship while allowing them to pass. "He'll agree," Lucas murmured, his voice barely audible. "But he doesn't trust us." John nodded, tipping his hat. "Trust is earned. Survival comes first." The chief raised a hand, signaling his guards to lower their weapons. The tension broke like a snapped bowstring, leaving the air heavy with unspoken understanding. The chief gestured toward the jungle, offering a curt nod before turning away. "Let's move," John said, his voice steady. "The jungle won't wait for us to make friends." The trek through the jungle was grueling. The undergrowth was thick, and the air buzzed with the calls of unseen creatures. Every step was a battle against tangled roots and unseen pitfalls. The group moved in a strained silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. Lucas lagged behind, his mind still reeling from the chief's memories. He couldn't shake the images of imperial atrocities, the weight of the Empire's cruelty pressing down on him like a suffocating fog. It was mid-afternoon when they emerged into a clearing, the sudden openness startling after hours in the dense jungle. But the sight before them was no relief. It was devastation. The clearing stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of lifeless earth where ancient trees once stood. Their stumps jutted out like jagged teeth, a grim testament to the Empire's insatiable hunger. The air smelled of ash and machinery, a stark contrast to the jungle's rich, earthy aroma. Erica clenched her fists, flames flickering briefly at her sides before she forced them to extinguish. "This is barbaric," she said, her voice trembling with anger. John knelt by one of the stumps, running a hand over the rough wood. "Imperial logging," he muttered. "They're clearing it for their outposts. Doesn't matter what they destroy." Lucas stood frozen, his eyes scanning the horizon. The field seemed to stretch on forever, a scar on the planet's surface. In the distance, he could see the silhouettes of machines, their massive forms chewing through what little greenery remained. "It's not just the trees," Lucas said quietly. "It's everything. The land, the people, the spirits of this place. They're breaking it all." Erica placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. "We'll stop them," she said firmly. "We'll find a way." John stood, his face shadowed beneath his hat. "Words are good, Erica," he said. "But we've got to live long enough to use them. Let's keep moving." The group pressed on, the jungle's oppressive embrace closing around them once more. The scars of the Empire's presence lingered in their minds, fueling their resolve. But as the shadows deepened and the path grew more treacherous, they knew the worst was yet to come. Chapter 3.2 The Path to Atraxia. The thick jungle foliage had finally begun to thin, the dense undergrowth of Vardis giving way to the rolling fields that marked the outskirts of Atraxia. It was a strange, eerie relief, the shadows of the jungle falling away to the wide open spaces of the outskirts. The path was quieter here, though the distant hum of the city could be felt in the air like the pulsing of a drumbeat. For John, Erica, and Lucas, it was a momentary pause, a brief reprieve from the dangers that lurked in the heart of the wilderness. As they emerged from the jungle's grasp, a soft breeze brushed across their skin, carrying the faint scent of the city ahead. The landscape had shifted into something far more civilized, but there was a tension in the air, something unseen but very real. Atraxia loomed just beyond the horizon, a sprawling, oppressive presence of steel and stone, teeming with the power of the Empire. It was a place of innovation, control, and fear, where every movement, every whisper was likely monitored by Imperial eyes. John led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, a seasoned captain who trusted his instincts more than anything else. His mind was already working through the next steps: how to blend in with the crowds, how to avoid Imperial detection, how to get them all to safety within the heart of the city. "We need to keep our heads low," he murmured, as the group continued along the narrow road that led toward Atraxia's outskirts. "This is a city built on control. Stay alert." Erica nodded, her fire magic flickering lightly within her, though she kept it under control. Her presence was as commanding as ever, though there was a subtle edge to her demeanor. The tension of entering the Empire's stronghold weighed heavily on her, too. The city was a maze of danger, and the deeper they went, the more the stakes would rise. Lucas, still carrying the burden of his connection to the prophecy and his dwindling strength, was quieter than usual. His mind was in constant motion, thinking of Mina, the looming presence of the Empire, and the fractured vision he had of the future. His telepathy was growing, and though he tried not to use it unless necessary, his senses were open. He could feel the pulse of Atraxia even from this distance, a strange mix of technology and magic, both in conflict and harmony. The road led them past farms and small settlements, remnants of the once vast, untamed wilderness. They passed crude homesteads, where a handful of indigenous tribes had managed to maintain a foothold, their defiant faces a stark contrast to the cold, efficient empire that now ruled the land. The outskirts of the city were a transition zone, where nature clashed with the creeping influence of imperial expansion. Here, the military presence was still light, but the further they traveled, the more John anticipated seeing imperial patrols. Soon, the dense growth of the jungle gave way to a more barren, utilitarian landscape. The road they were on curved gently to the right, revealing a large truck stop, a gathering place for those traveling to and from Atraxia. It was a pit stop for both traders and travelers, a place where information flowed as freely as the supplies moving in and out of the megalopolis. John slowed as they approached, casting a quick glance at Erica and Lucas before he steered them off the main road and toward the truck stop. It was not a place for lingering, but they needed information, and the truck stop was as good a place as any to get it. The truck stop was a cluttered, chaotic affair, metal structures with billboards hanging from them, the sounds of conversation and the rattle of machines filling the air. The scent of oil, dust, and cheap food mixed in the air, the sound of idle chatter overlapping with the occasional burst of laughter. Travelers and workers milled about, going about their business. But there was a layer of tension here, too. An undercurrent that hinted at the control the Empire had over the lives of those passing through. John led the way, keeping his stride steady, his eyes flicking over the crowd as he kept the group close. Erica stayed to his right, her fiery aura restrained, though still ever present. Lucas followed closely, his gaze flicking nervously between the passing faces. There was a palpable sense of unease in him, the lingering anxiety over the Empire's ever-watchful eyes gnawing at him. They approached a small booth near the center of the truck stop where a group of local traders stood huddled together. One of them, a grizzled man with a weathered face, caught sight of John and gave him a curt nod. It was the sort of nod that suggested recognition, but not familiarity. John had dealt with traders like this before, people who lived on the edge, moving between the cracks of the Empire's watchful eyes. "Information's the currency here," John said lowly, almost to himself. Erica, for her part, seemed willing to let him take the lead, though her sharp eyes never left the surroundings. John approached the booth, speaking quietly with the traders. In exchange for a small handful of Imperial credits, ones they had acquired earlier, he was able to glean valuable information about the layout of Atraxia. The traders had their ears to the ground, always aware of the best routes and how to navigate the city's heavy surveillance. They spoke in hushed tones about the resistance, confirming that there were factions operating within the city, but it was a fractured, dangerous network. The Empire's grip on Atraxia was tightening, and any wrong move could bring disaster. But they also learned that the Imperial credits they had, acquired from an earlier escapade, would be accepted here, a small mercy in a world where even the most basic exchange could be treacherous. With the intel gathered, they knew their next step. Enter Atraxia, stay under the radar, and find a way to connect with the Resistance. As they left the truck stop, the city proper loomed ahead, its towering obsidian and steel spires stretching toward the heavens. The oppressive atmosphere of the city hit them with full force now. It was impossible to ignore the sense of constant surveillance, the feeling of being watched from every direction. The air was thick with the weight of control, the hum of the Orion Nexus, an ever-present reminder of the Empire's reach. John kept moving, his hands subtly guiding the others as they walked along the crowded streets. They blended into the throngs of workers, travelers, and Imperial soldiers, ordinary faces in a sea of them. But they were anything but ordinary. They were intruders in the heart of the Empire, and every step they took drew them deeper into the heart of danger. They reached the city's outskirts, and the weight of Atraxia's presence seemed to press on them even more. The Resistance was their goal, but finding it, hidden among the shadows of Imperial control, would not be easy. The tension in the air was palpable. They needed to stay alert, every moment crucial. It was a game of patience now. Time was on their side, but only just. The air in Atraxia was thick with a sense of oppression as the group approached the heart of the Empire's stronghold on Vardis. Towering spires of obsidian and steel rose high above them, casting long shadows across the streets below. The city, a chaotic blend of Imperial technology and ancient mystical elements, pulsed with an energy that both awed and unnerved the travelers. The sprawling urban jungle stretched far and wide, its massive walls dotted with tribal carvings that marked the long-standing tension between the native inhabitants of Vardis and the Imperial settlers. It was a place where the past and present collided, where the Empire sought to crush resistance while drawing power from the ancient magics that still lingered beneath the surface. John, Erica, and Lucas moved cautiously through the streets, blending in with the masses of Imperial citizens, but their movements were deliberate. their eyes scanning the crowd, alert to any sign of danger. They had no intention of being discovered by the Empire's watchful eyes, but they also had to make their way to the heart of the Resistance, a base hidden deep within the city. It wasn't going to be an easy task. Atraxia was a city built on control, surveillance, and secrecy, and any wrong move could lead to their discovery. This place, it feels like we're walking in a trap, Lucas muttered under his breath, his eyes darting nervously between the towering buildings. John nodded, his expression grim. Stay alert. The Empire's eyes are everywhere, but we're in the belly of the beast now. We have no choice but to keep moving. Erica, always the pragmatic one, scanned the street, noting every exit, every alleyway. We need to find our contact. If we're lucky, we'll make it to the Resistance base without drawing attention. Their destination was a dark alley off the main street, known only to those with ties to the underground network of the Resistance. The contact they were supposed to meet had arranged to meet them there, if they were lucky. But luck was something they couldn't rely on, not in a city where the Empire's grip was tightening with each passing day. They entered the alley cautiously, the noise of the city dimming behind them as the walls closed in. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, jittery shadows against the grimy walls. "Do you think they'll show?" Erica asked, her voice low. "They better," John muttered, eyes narrowed. "If they don't, we'll have bigger problems than not finding the Resistance." They waited, tense but vigilant, until a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, dressed in the tattered remnants of an Imperial uniform, stepped forward. He looked nervous, glancing around as if expecting trouble at any moment. "Are you the contact?" Erica asked, stepping forward, her eyes cold and calculating. The man hesitated for a moment before nodding, his eyes darting between the group and the shadows. "I am, but the price has gone up since we last spoke." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean, price?" His voice held a note of frustration. "The Empire has been cracking down harder than I expected," the contact explained, shifting uncomfortably. "I need more than what was agreed upon, or I can't help you." Erica stepped closer, her fire magic flickering at her fingertips, and the heat of it radiated in the air. "We don't have time for games," she said, her voice icy. "Give us the information, or you'll regret it." The contact flinched, and for a moment it seemed as though he might argue. But Erica's fiery display was enough to break his resolve. With a resigned sigh, he held out a small map, his voice trembling. "Fine, take it. But you better get to the Resistance fast. They're already getting suspicious about your arrival." Erica took the map, her eyes still locked on the contact. "Good. Now get out of here before I change my mind." The man didn't need to be told twice. He disappeared back into the shadows, leaving the group to deal with the next obstacle. "Let's move," John said, his voice low and commanding. "The Resistance is close, but we still have to be careful." They continued down the alley, winding their way through narrow passageways until they reached a hidden entrance, one that led beneath the city into the network of tunnels used by the Resistance. The air was stale, damp with the smell of underground water and dirt. John led the way, with Erica and Lucas following closely behind. The tunnels were dark, their walls lined with ancient stonework that seemed to hum with an odd energy. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. There was a strange stillness in the air, broken only by the occasional scurrying of rats or the faint echo of distant voices. As they reached the Resistance's hidden base, they were greeted with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The Resistance had been waiting for them, or so they thought. Word had already spread about Lucas's arrival. His reputation, or perhaps his connection to the prophecy, had made him a symbol of hope for those who opposed the Empire. But as they entered the base, the initial hope in the room quickly faded. "You look." One of the Resistance leaders trailed off, his gaze falling on Lucas. "You look nothing like what we expected." Lucas felt the weight of their disappointment press against him. He could barely keep his eyes open, the strain of his powers and the physical exhaustion finally catching up with him. He felt as though he were barely holding himself together, and seeing the disillusionment in their eyes only deepened his sense of failure. "I'm still here," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I'm still trying to make things right." Erica placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. "We've been through a lot. He's not the same as when you heard about him, but he's still the key." Lucas didn't respond, instead looking to the resistance leaders, his mind already turning to their next move. Is my friend still here?" he asked, his voice quiet, his eyes fixed on the man who had greeted them. The leader nodded grimly. "Yes, they're in a more secure location, deeper in the city. But you're too late. Things have escalated. The Empire has already begun moving against us." Lucas's heart sank. The Empire's reach was tightening even here. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Before they could formulate a plan, the leaders of the Resistance brought them up to speed on the Empire's latest actions. Over the last 3 days of their journey through the jungle, the Empire had been preparing for something, an escalation that had now reached the city. The Resistance had learned that they were now wanted individuals on Vardis, their names circulating in Imperial circles. The pressure was mounting. They would have to move quickly, or they risked being caught in the Empire's tightening noose. "The Empire has already set their sights on you," one of the Resistance leaders said, his voice low and urgent. "They know you're here." The news was grim, but not unexpected. Still, the weight of it pressed heavily on Lucas and the rest of the group. They had to make decisions quickly, and the consequences of those decisions would echo far beyond the streets of Atraxia. As they huddled together, formulating their next steps, the tension in the room was palpable. The future of their mission, and possibly the fate of Vardis itself, was hanging in the balance.